So as many of y'all know, the Four Nations tournament just happened at the same time as the NBA All-Star Game. And because of the success of the Four Nations tournament, especially that USA-Canada game, a lot of people who don't regularly watch hockey are now tuning into the game because they've seen that hockey's actually kind of fun, which we've been saying for a minute, but this is the same time where the NBA All-Star Game is extremely boring. I mean, last year, they actually did really well. Here in Indy, they had the highest attendance for any All-Star game that they had had in 14 years. And it was fun. The Rising Stars game had some really good competition between Jaden Ivey and Ben Mathurin. It was a good time. But then this year, I mean, it's been falling off. It's not like last year was amazing or anything, but it was better. And then this year, it's just took another step back. So the NBA All-Star Game just continues to be this really boring thing that the players don't want to be at and nobody tries, and it's just bad. So with these two things happening at the same time, a lot of people who are frustrated with the NBA are now kind of going to the NHL because they see the NHL is doing a lot of things right that the NBA is doing wrong. So let's talk about that in this video. Now, if y'all have been watching the channel, you know that I have been advocating for the sport of hockey for a very long time. I've made a video like a year or two ago talking about why it's great. I've made several videos talking about why people should watch hockey. So it's great to see that it's kind of popping off right now. But if you've watched this channel, you also know I'm from Indianapolis. I'm a basketball guy. Basketball, football are the two first sports that I fell in love with because I'm from Indianapolis. That is the heart of basketball country. In the state of Indiana, no sport comes close to basketball. It just has this aura about it that like basketball is almost like the American dream. Like every kid growing up, you play YMCA youth league or church league or something. You want to go to the NBA. You want to play on your high school team. You want to play for IU or Purdue or Butler or Ball State. You know, like basketball is the thing that every boy wants to do, and a lot of girls now, like every kid wants to play basketball. Basketball is the thing. And growing up in the 2000s and the 2010s, there was nothing even close to it because you had the Pacers being great, going up against the Heat and LeBron and all those guys. I mean, the playoffs had this style and this flair about it. There was like every intro had a theme song and it was like sung by the actual singer. It wasn't a remake. We're talking it was sung by the original singer. I mean, and every team had a different play style. And you had guys that were mid-range specialists, which is basically dead now. Like, there was so much more variation and just a lot more entertainment value in the NBA. The league was just so different back then. There was more variation. It felt different. And I really doubt that the NHL ever overtakes the NBA. I don't think that's ever going to happen. And if it does, it's going to be way down the line. But I do think that in the near future, the NHL could rival the NBA. And those two leagues could kind of be at a similar level with each other as opposed to having this huge gap. One of the things that plays a huge role in that is the way that NHL media works and the way that NBA media works. See, the NBA media is much more focused on like the same five teams. You've got the Lakers, the Warriors, the Celtics, sometimes the Heat, sometimes the Knicks. They're always focused on East and West Coast teams. That's the main thing. When it comes to everybody else, they just kind of don't care. I mean, I'm a Pacers fan, as y'all know. I watched the Pacers-Knicks series, obviously. The ESPN coverage of the Pacers-Knicks series was horrendous. I mean, it was absolutely terrible. It felt like they talked about the Pacers maybe once every 10 minutes, and they were winning the games. They won the series. It was maddening. It was terrible. Whereas the NHL media still has favorite teams, but those favorite teams are in places like Montreal and Detroit. It's not just East and West Coast. You've got Canada and the Midwest. I mean, you've also got Minnesota. You've got other places that are big hockey markets that aren't just on the East and West Coast. So you involve the Midwest in there. You involve Canada because hockey, that's Canada's sport. And players want to go there. Players want to come to Detroit. For people that don't watch the NHL and don't watch hockey, they would be really confused when NHL players and hockey players say all the good stuff about Detroit. Because in the NBA, places like Indianapolis, Detroit, Cleveland, those places are treated like third world countries. People act like there isn't clean water and you're gonna get shot just by walking outside your door. Whereas NHL media treats Detroit kind of like it's a city on a hill, because the Red Wings are super successful and they're an original six franchise and players want to come and play there and be a part of the history. I mean, putting on the winged wheel is almost like putting on Yankee pinstripes for hockey, so it's a big deal. And NHL media just works differently. It's evenly distributed for the most part. The way that the NHL media works is refreshing. It feels better. It's more rewarding as a fan than the NBA. And then you also have the parody of the NHL compared to the NBA. In the NBA, it's much more ring culture, more super teams, more guys leaving, getting traded, signing with teams that they think are going to help them win a championship. When James Harden, Kyrie, and Kevin Durant all went to Brooklyn. When Bosh, Wade, and LeBron all went to Miami. Now, what the Lakers are doing with LeBron and Luka Doncic. You also had the really failed super team of Carmelo Anthony, Russell Westbrook, and Paul George. I remember when people thought that team was going to be nice. I mean, they kind of were, but they got nowhere near close to being a dynasty. Whereas in the NHL, you still have super teams kind of, but teams are built much more through the draft than trades and free agency. And players like Connor McDavid, Alexander Ovechkin, Sidney Crosby, all those guys have never played for another team other than the one that drafted them. McDavid's always been in Edmonton, Sidney Crosby's always been in Pittsburgh, and Alexander Ovechkin has always been in Washington, D.C. And not only is that good for fans, it's good for brand identity, kind of, I think. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. By having the superstars of your game mainly be in one jersey for most of their career, it helps, in my opinion. But fans like it because they can count on Alexander Ovechkin's not just going to leave overnight. He's not just going to wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm done. I don't like this anymore. Trade me to LA. Trade me to Anaheim. Like, that's not really going to happen. It's just not something that goes on in the NHL. You obviously still have stars that get traded and signed and stuff. I mean, Patrick Kane, one of the biggest names in hockey, got traded to New York and now he's in Detroit. But that was towards the tail end of his career. That was not like, oh, he's 29 years old. No, that's when he's like 33. So it's towards the down part of his career. He's still great. He's still Patrick Kane. He's still Showtime. But he's not what he was winning Stanley Cups with the Blackhawks. Through most of his prime, really all of his prime, he was in Chicago. He was with the Blackhawks. And that's just something that I think fans like a lot more compared to the NBA, where you can wake up one day and it's just like, oh, this player that I've bought like 3 of his jerseys and I've supported him his whole career, he's gone. Again, that stuff still happens, but it's just more rare and it's just not something you do. It's kind of frowned upon almost in the NHL. Hockey players are a lot more prideful and a lot more loyal in the city that they play in. And it doesn't matter if it's Winnipeg or Detroit or you're in Florida or you're in New York. That's something that it's refreshing. It's a breath of fresh air compared to the NBA. And it feels less corporate. The NHL has a much more personal feel between fans and players and teams. Whereas the NBA, as I've gotten older, has gotten a lot more corporate. And they've separated themselves. And there's this huge disconnect between fans, players, and teams. Just because of how much money there is in it now and the surge in popularity that the sport has gotten, it's changed a lot for the worse when it comes to fan experience and accessibility and that type of stuff. It just doesn't feel as alive as it did. Whereas the NHL, it's always felt like that. I mean, the NHL, especially right now, there's so much parody and the NHL always feels alive. Like, I've never really felt that the league is dying or it's dead or it's boring. Obviously, another big difference that people are pointing out, hockey players play through a lot of injuries. Just wait until the season's over and the playoffs are over and just read the list of injuries that guys were playing through in the playoffs. It is insane. Whereas in the NBA, more and more stars are taking games off for load management. Their knee's a little sore. And this is kind of an old head take. It doesn't sound the greatest because there are a lot of guys that play through injury in the NBA. Everybody's banged up. Everybody's hurt. It's a professional sport. Guys are in pain all the time. But the difference is when you buy a ticket, like I'm a Red Wings fan. If I buy a ticket, I know that, if I bought it a week before the game and Dylan Larkin's not hurt, I know Dylan Larkin's going to play. Whereas if you buy a ticket to go see the Lakers and it's game 78, they've already clinched a playoff spot, and they're playing the Atlanta Hawks. LeBron's probably not going to play, and not even because he's really hurt, it's going to be because of load management. So for fans, it's another thing where fans are really influenced by this type of stuff, and as a fan, it's really cool to know your star's going to play even if the game doesn't matter. It still matters. It's a regular season game. It counts towards your record. When it comes to hockey players, the level of competitiveness is way higher in the regular season and in the playoffs and just throughout the whole sport compared to what's going on in the NBA. And as bad as it sounds, fans like it when guys tough out injuries. Fans like it when guys have gutsy performances. It's just kind of human nature. It's kind of American culture. We love underdogs. We love comeback stories. And hockey has a lot more than that right now than basketball. Does load management work? I have no clue. But I know in hockey, they're playing just as many games. You're playing 82 games. You have back-to-back. Not only do you have West Coast trips, but you have Western Canada trips where the weather is nowhere near as nice. It's cold. And these guys are having to go there and play hockey. And these guys aren't nearly as injured missing games as NBA players are. And I know it's a different sport, but hockey is a physically punishing game. I mean, you're getting hit a lot. You're taking pucks to the knee, to the arm, to the face, to the ear, to the mouth, to your ankle. Not saying basketball isn't a tough sport. These guys, those guys tough things out all the time. I'm not trying to be that guy that's like, hockey's the only real sport, football, hockey, MMA, those contact, physical, punching, whatever, that's the only real sport. No. I mean, in the NBA, guys' knees and ankles and feet are just getting absolutely tore up throughout the course of a year. But so are hockey players. And the NHL doesn't have this problem. And then, you have things like divisions where in hockey, divisions matter because the top 3 divisional teams guaranteed a playoff spot with 2 wildcard spots. Whereas in the NBA, it's just straight up 6 best teams in the East get a playoff spot, and then 7, 8, 9, 10 play in for the last 2. So divisional games in the NBA don't really matter outside of the Eastern Conference Central Division, where everybody hates each other. Things like rivalries and divisional games mattering, the NHL has a lot more of that than the NBA. In the NHL, all of the original 6 teams hate each other, all the Canadian teams hate each other, all the divisional teams hate each other. Outside of those people on Twitter that have like 6 different teams that they like, just about everybody hates everybody in the NHL. Whereas in the NBA, outside of the team that you lost in the playoffs to last year, or maybe if you have a Giannis Antetokounmpo ball incident, you're not really going to have a rivalry, and it's very rare to have a long-standing rivalry with another team. And then, you have the politics. I'm not going to talk about the politics. Politics are boring and stupid. Sports are fun and exciting. I'm not here to talk about politics with y'all. I'm just a regular dude. You're just a regular dude. We don't need to talk about politics. That divides people. Sports are supposed to bring people together. I'm not here to talk about the Four Nations tournament from a political standpoint and all that stuff. I think USA Canada would have had just as much energy behind it without politics because it's USA Canada. It's Canada's sport. It's Canada's game. They think that they're better than everybody at it. Whether it's the Russians, the Americans, the Swedes, the Germans, Finnish people, it doesn't matter. They think they're the best. And we're Americans. We think we're the best at everything, and we want to win everything. So those 2 things going up against each other, it's going to be a charged game. That fight, those 3 fights that were going to happen, would have happened anyways. It didn't matter about the national anthem getting booed. It doesn't matter about politics. That stuff would have happened anyway. So I'm not here to talk about that with y'all because that's stupid. But I think both of these leagues could really grow together if they just work together. I don't think the NBA and NHL are really ever going to work together, but if they did, it'd be pretty beneficial for both leagues. But as of right now, the NHL's coming up and the NBA needs to figure out something. I mean, it's not like it's going to crash overnight. I don't think they're going to have a NASCAR type incident where the sport's competing with football and then all of a sudden you're one of the least popular major sports. But they are going to have problems. As someone who loves basketball, loves hockey, y'all know me, I watch all different kinds of sports. And the Pacers, that's one of my first, Pacers, Colts, Red Wings, Tigers, Purdue. It's what I was born into. I don't have anything against the NBA. I don't have anything against the NHL. I love both the leagues. I love both of my teams that play in those leagues. So this isn't like hockey favoritism going on. This is just a fact that the NBA is not doing a good job right now. And the NHL isn't even doing a good job. But Gary Bettman is one of the worst commissioners in all of sports. That guy does more to hurt hockey than help it. But all it took was a week where the NBA had a terrible All-Star weekend and the NHL had Canada versus USA. And that's all it took to have the sports world talking about hockey. If I'm the NBA, I'd be kind of concerned about that. That's just me. Anyways, I'm Limitless Pulse. I'll see y'all next time.
What you get the mix right, nigga, put it in the blender. Hell yeah, I'm Wingstop. Jump on the chicken tender. It's like the beef with energy and water like timber. Hey, turning, looking like dinner. It's like I got the bag, boy or girl.